you,
Congressman.
Chairman Fleischman. My distinguished colleague from Florida, Ms. Frankel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Administrator Power. So good to have you. I'm over here. Hello. Mr. Chair, I would like to remind folks that the suffering in Gaza is a result of Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel, brutal terrorist attack. And I want to remind folks, too, that there is still so much suffering in Israel. And Hamas leaders have clearly said that this is just a start. So I want to say very clearly that Hamas must release the hostages. They should stand down, which is questionable that they will. And obviously allow humanitarian assistance to flow, and hopefully all parties will cooperate with that. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, oh, I try to make you Speaker. Mr. Chairman, that Israel needs, yeah, Israel needs a time and space to defend itself. And I do hope that we can come together and pass the Ukraine and Israel budget that will allow that to happen, and that it must include humanitarian support. I wanted to ask Administrator Power, I'm a grandmother, so the thought of children starving any place is very disturbing to me. And I think you said this, there is famine all over the world. Can you quantify that? And like with examples of countries? I think,
Well,
yeah.
again,
Yes.
I'm very deferential here to the experts. There's a a committee of experts that looks at this, and there's a set of maybe if you're interested, sort of the technical requirements around the percentage of children who are malnourished, the number of families, percentage of families facing severe food insecurity. I think the places that we are most alert to the risk of food insecurity and food scarcity causing large-scale loss of life and suffering would be Sudan right now and Gaza. But there are pockets, in Burkina Faso where warnings have been issued. There have been pockets of Ethiopia in light of the drought conditions and very significant conflict that has impeded humanitarian access. But I think, again, one needs resources, one needs access, and that requires political will among all of us. So, yeah.
One of probably the most disturbing aspects of this Hamas attack on Israel has been the sexual violence against women. And I have to say this, also one of the most disturbing aspects of Putin's war in Ukraine has also been the sexual assault on women. And it seems like, people say, oh, well, this is always part of war. Well, it is not always. It's part of some wars, and some, obviously, military forces use sexual assault as a tool. But we can't just let it go with a shrug. And so my question is there anything in the budget on this particular subject of protecting or working with women in these conflict zones or after? I know Ukraine especially, this has been a very big issue.
Let me start by saying that it should never be greeted with a shrug. We should never get used to the weaponization of sexual violence. I started my career in Bosnia, where there were rape camps that had been set up to target Bosnian Muslim women primarily. And what Hamas did and the documentation of that is it's horrifying. And all of us should force ourselves to read these accounts. When I was in Israel last month, I traveled to Kibbutz Be'eri, where more than 100 people had been killed, and from where people were kidnapped and hostages have been taken. And, you know, again, we have to confront this, and we have to be there for survivors on the other side, no matter where this happens. Tigray is a place where there was rampant sexual violence as part of that war. You asked a question, you know, we operate globally, but we operate country by country, and I'm happy to follow up with you and get you sort of what share of our humanitarian programming exists in this space. But I can't resist also coming back to the National Security Supplemental and how important it is, because you started your question by talking about food insecurity and the risk of famine. When you have people who are at risk of dying if they don't get access to rations, and the pie in which you are, you know, and the number of crises and conflicts is increasing. I mean, a year ago when I last testified here, we didn't have the war in Gaza and we didn't have the war in Sudan. I mean, so the wars keep getting added to the ledger and unfortunately not getting taken away. So I worry that it is programming like this that is most likely to get cut. That is the psychosocial care and the GBV services to survivors. And so that is, again, if we can right-size our humanitarian assistance budget, just to even with the new wars, to just be flat with last year would allow us to do more of this kind of programming.
Mr. Chair, just what are the numbers in Sudan? What?
In terms of the food insecurity, well, in terms of the numbers who are IPC, the most extreme, I think it is 4 million people are in that sort of most extreme food insecurity category. But there, again, the issue is the two warring factions. We have commodities. The U.S. spent nearly $1 billion since the war began on humanitarian assistance, including $600 million from USAID. But the two men who have taken their country down the path of ruin are not allowing convoys to flow freely from one area to the next. This is, I recognize, something, again, that is happening in other parts of the world as well. But we feel we could reach many more people if we can get more resources and if the political pressure on those leaders will allow those goods to flow.
Mr. Speaker, if I might say, and I thank you for your answer, I would call on these humanitarian protesters of the world to also raise their voices for what's happening in Sudan.
Let me associate myself with the words that you've been
Thank
mentioning.
you, and I yield.
Mr.